Welcome to The Critique. Today's script analyzes the ideological shifts of Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens before pitching a documentary about Judaism and Zionism. Let's jump right in. The narrative structure occasionally conflates personal motives with ideological critiques, which muddles the core thesis.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Right now, this material is oscillating pretty wildly.
Right, because in one breath, you get this really sharp intellectual teardown of the commentators' methods.
Specifically utilizing Dinesh D'Souza's brilliant concept of ventriloquist journalism.
Yeah, but then in the very next breath, the script pivots into highly speculative attacks on their personal character.
Right, exactly. The writer spends all this valuable time guessing if Candace Owens has had a, quote, psychiatric break, or, if she is just hunting for $50,000 to $60,000 every single day.
And it wonders aloud if Tucker is driven by jealousy, like he has this desperate desire to claw back his Fox News access.
Yeah, and by exploring these speculative, emotional, and financial avenues, the script inadvertently distracts its audience. It distracts them from the much stronger, evidence-based analytical points being made just a few paragraphs prior.
It really creates a whiplash effect for the reader.
It really does. So the suggestion here is to draw a hard, impermeable line between the critique of their methodology and the guesswork about their motives.
Just cleanly separate those two elements.
Exactly. And ultimately, strip away the guesswork entirely, because that allows the core argument to stand firmly on an objective, verifiable analysis of their public actions.
Because the psychology of an audience is pretty delicate, right?
Very. When you speculate about a broadcaster's bank balance or their emotional stability, you immediately hand a skeptical listener an off-ramp. If they don't believe your specific guess about Candace's daily income, they will mentally discard your entire critique.
Even the valid points.
Exactly. But if you focus purely on the structural mechanics of their broadcasting, the argument becomes completely bulletproof.
Hold on. I want to challenge that approach for a second.
Okay, sure.
If we strip out all the financial speculation, the jealousy angles, and the armchair psychology, doesn't the script risk becoming a dry academic media studies paper?
I can see why you'd think that.
Because the audience tuning into a broadcast about polarizing figures often wants a fiery takedown. So how does the writer keep the fangs in this script if we completely remove the personal attack?
Well, that is the exact trap writers often fall into, assuming that calling someone greedy is the most devastating attack available. I would argue that relying on verifiable actions is actually far more devastating.
More so than guessing someone's mental state?
Oh, definitely. And much more compelling to watch. Think about it. If you accuse a broadcaster of just doing it for the money, their supporters have an easy defense. They just say, no, they aren't. They're a brave truth teller, sacrificing their mainstream career.
Right, it's a total dead-end argument.
It is. But if you meticulously demonstrate how a former primetime host who built a massive career on fearless independent monologues now hides behind obscure fringe guests to launder his new ideology, you aren't just calling him greedy.
You are entirely dismantling his intellectual brand.
Exactly.
You're exposing a fundamental cowardice in his new format, rather than just accusing him of chasing greenbacks.
Precisely. And to apply this practically in the script, the writer needs to lean entirely into D'Souza's observation about Tucker's lack of monologues.
Because that isn't an opinion.
No, it is a measurable structural change in his output. The writer should highlight exactly how Tucker uses these obscure figures as puppets.
Right, to project his own anti-Israel or pro-Sharia biases.
Yes, so he doesn't have to own those statements directly. The script mentions his uncritical interview with Nick Fuentes. The writer should unpack that specific interview as the ultimate, undeniable proof of this ventriloquist dynamic.
Like detailing how Tucker just nods along and offers zero pushback?
Exactly. He lets the guest absorb all the risk while he reaps the engagement. And for Owens, instead of asking if her behavior is about the cash, focus strictly on the fact that she operates a parody of investigative journalism.
Right, by highlighting the undeniable reality that she cannot produce a single important, relevant document regarding her so-called bombshells.
Exactly. Stick to the verifiable actions.
Okay, so if we take away the assumption that they are doing this just for a quick daily paycheck or because they've lost their minds, the script still has to answer the obvious, lingering question.
Which is, why are they doing it?
Right, and that requires looking past the commentators themselves. The assertion that these commentators have undergone a sudden, inexplicable ideological shift lacks an exploration of the broader media ecosystem that enables this transition.
It completely glosses over it.
Yeah. Currently, the script frames their current content simply as a descent into complete insanity.
Or a bizarre type of political pornography.
Exact. Those are colorful, evocative descriptors, but relying on them leaves a massive gap in the script's underlying logic. By treating these ideological shifts as isolated psychological anomalies, the material misses a crucial opportunity.
It misses the chance to explain exactly why this specific brand of contrarianism is succeeding so wildly in the marketplace right now.
Yeah.
And that is the missing foundational layer of this entire critique. To strengthen this, I suggest grounding the behavioral analysis deeply in the mechanics of modern independent media.
So pulling back the curtain on how this digital ecosystem functions.
Right, because by doing that, the writer provides the audience with a much more sophisticated explanation for their ideological drift. When the script just calls it complete insanity, it accidentally implies that the behavior is random or irrational.
But it is not random at all.
No, it is highly calibrated.
It's like describing the severe symptoms of a virus in excruciating detail, but never once mentioning the contaminated water supply that the entire town is drinking from.
That is a perfect analogy.
The algorithm is the water supply. And right now, the writer is spending all their word count analyzing the fever instead of testing the water. By focusing on the ecosystem, the script shifts from sounding like a personal grievance into a precise structural diagnosis.
Spot on.
So how can the writer literally script this broader context without getting bogged down in tech jargon?
Well, the most effective way is to briefly but explicitly introduce the concept of audience capture. You can use Tucker's progression as the perfect textbook example of algorithmic escalation.
Because the script already notes his ideological journey, right?
Yeah, which is great. It points out that he started with Netanyahu is bad, which then progressed to Israel is bad.
And that escalated to the Jews are bad, moving on to Islam is good, and finally landing on the extreme of maybe we should apologize to bin Laden.
Right. And what the writer needs to do now is frame this progression not as a bizarre personal quirk or some modern replica of Hitler's pact with the Grand Mufti, but as a calculated mathematical escalation.
An escalation required to keep an increasingly radicalized online audience engaged.
Exactly. In the independent media space, nuance simply does not get rewarded by the algorithm. Escalation is the only thing that gets rewarded.
So the script needs to clearly state that the destination journalism D'Souza mentions isn't a glitch in their programming, it is the entire business model itself.
Precisely. The writer could script a compelling 30-second breakdown of this mechanic right in the middle of the broadcast.
Something like, if you interview a standard politician and ask standard questions, you get a baseline level of engagement.
Yeah, but if you interview a known extremist, platform them, and treat them like a rising intellectual star, the sheer shock value drives massive algorithmic engagement.
And here's the trap. Once you start feeding that particular algorithm, you cannot go back to standard political commentary without bleeding the radicalized audience you just spent months cultivating.
Exactly. If the script explicitly explains this mechanic to the viewer, it elevates the entire segment. It signals to the listener, hey, we aren't just sitting here complaining about two people, we are actively decoding the machine that produces them.
That framing makes the analysis so much more robust. It elevates the listener's understanding of media literacy, and diagnosing that poisoned water supply naturally sets up the larger stakes of the conversation.
Which is exactly what we need for the final section.
Right. The transition from the critique of media personalities to the promotion of the Zionism documentary feels abrupt and misses a powerful thematic bridge.
It really does. As the script reads right now, it jumps directly from concluding that Tucker and Candace spread mistruths straight into an extensive promotional trailer.
For the documentary, Zionism and Judaism, the False Separation.
Yeah, and because there was no clear connective tissue pulling those two distinct halves of the broadcast together, the documentary pitch feels like a jarring subject change.
It reads almost like a commercial break, rather than the natural, inevitable climax of the argument the writer just spent 10 minutes building.
It feels like two entirely separate scripts that have been grafted together at the last minute. You have this massive, looming cultural problem established in the first half of the script, the algorithmic radicalization, and you have the solution in the second half with the documentary.
But the script currently forgets to tell the audience that the two are explicitly connected.
Right. The suggestion here is to explicitly weaponize the misinformation being spread by the commentators as the exact, precise reason the documentary is culturally urgent right now.
I want to get very concrete with this, because transitions are notoriously difficult to write well. How should the writer reconstruct this transition to lock the punditry critique and the documentary pitch together?
You have to use Tucker and Candace's specific platforming of figures who separate Jewish identity from Israeli sovereignty as the direct, undeniable catalyst for the film.
So literally script it by saying something like, because figures with massive audiences are actively spreading the comfortable, highly engaging lie that Judaism and Zionism are opposed, we can no longer rely on modern commentary.
Yes, and then follow it with, we must return to the primary source, the Torah. Think about what that phrasing does. It completely reframes the documentary in the mind of the viewer.
It is no longer just educational historical content you are hoping they might click on.
Right. It is framed as a necessary, urgent antidote to the exact ventriloquist journalism you just spent the first half of the broadcast dismantling.
I hear that, but let me throw a wrench into it.
Go for it.
If the writer tightly binds the documentary's relevance to Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens in that highly specific way, do they risk instantly dating the documentary?
That is a fantastic point.
Because what happens in 3 or 4 years when these specific commentators fade from relevance or pivot to a completely new grift? If the audience no longer cares about Tucker's podcast, does the documentary pitch lose all of its power because it's chained to him?
It's a very real risk if handled poorly. The way around it, the way to keep the script evergreen, is to frame the commentators not as the inventors of this lie, but merely as the latest symptoms of a 3,000-year-old misunderstanding.
Ah, okay, that makes sense.
The script needs to make it abundantly clear that Tucker and Candace didn't invent this false separation between the faith and the land. They are simply the loudest voices currently exploiting it for clicks in our modern ecosystem.
So the writer can bridge this by scripting something like, this colonization accusation didn't start with independent podcasters in a studio. It is an ancient misdirection.
Yeah, and then add, but because they are currently broadcasting it to millions, we have no choice but to go back to the book of Genesis to show why it has always been fundamentally flawed.
Oh, wow. That is a brilliant pivot.
Right? By doing that, the pundits serve as the contemporary, urgent hook to grab the viewer's attention today, but the documentary itself remains completely timeless.
It remains timeless because the script positions the film as addressing the root, ancient architecture of the lie, rather than just swatting at the people currently telling it on social.
Exactly.
That creates a beautiful, seamless narrative flow from the first word to the last. The listener goes from understanding the specific, observable actions of modern punditry to seeing the systemic, algorithmic flaws driving those acts.
Right into the ancient texts that disprove these specific lies being peddled for engagement.
It takes the script from being a fleeting reaction to today's news cycle and turns it into a definitive, structural response.
It really elevates the whole piece.
Okay, to recap our core focus areas for this. First, the writer needs to tighten the argumentative cohesion. This means prioritizing the methodological critique, the ventriloquist journalism, over the motive speculation.
Right, drop the armchair psychology completely.
Second, the script most deepen its context by acknowledging the media ecosystem. Don't just call it insanity. Explain the algorithm that enables and rewards this radicalization.
And finally, the writer needs to build a much stronger thematic bridge between the commentary and the documentary pitch,
Ensuring the entire broadcast feels like one cohesive journey, from the problem to the solution.
So for the actionable next steps, I want the writer to go back through the script and heavily amplify that ventriloquist journalism framing. It is the strongest asset you have. Completely drop the financial guesswork about 50 grand a day and drop the psychiatric speculation.
And then take a full paragraph to contextualize the algorithmic incentives and audience capture that are driving this so-called insanity.
Yes, let the audience see the matrix. And finally, rewrite that transition. Use the commentator's specific lies as the direct launchpad to introduce the documentary's thesis.
Proving to the viewer that the film is the ultimate answer to the problem you just laid out.
Exactly.
We warmly invite the listener to apply these structural adjustments and submit the revised work back to us for another round of feedback. Remember, just like a structural engineer arriving at the site of a collapsed building, our job isn't to guess how the architects were feeling that day. Our job is to point at the wreckage, measure the physical impact, and show the audience exactly how the foundation gave way.